Hello and welcome to the Bible for Worship at St. Paul Lutheran Church on this festival of Christmas, when our gospel reading is written in the Gospel of John, chapter 1, verses 1 through 14. At creation, the Word, so close to God that it was God. At creation, close to God, everything existed through the Word. Apart from it, not one thing existed which has ever existed. Life was by the Word, and life was the light of humanity. The light shines in the darkness, and darkness does not grasp it. There was a person sent from God whose name was John. He came as a witness, so that he could testify concerning the light, so that all would believe through him. He was not the light, but came so he could testify concerning the light. The light was true, which enlightens every person coming into the world. It was in the world, but although the world existed through it, the world did not recognize him. He came into what was his own, and his own did not accept him. Whoever did accept him, to them he gave authority to become children of God, to those who believe in his name, who were begotten not from bloodlines, nor from the will of flesh, nor from the will of a man, but from God. The Word became flesh and resided among us. We saw his glory, glory as of an only child close to a father, full of grace and truth. The gospel of the Lord. Thanks be to God. At creation. No one reading this beginning of the Gospel of John could miss it. Literally in the Greek, it is in the beginning, just the way Genesis starts, at creation. Mark begins the story of Jesus with his baptism by John, the appearance of John the Baptist, and then Jesus comes and is baptized. Matthew and Luke, in slightly different ways, push back the beginning of their story of Jesus to his childhood, even his infancy, and including his genealogy, the heritage that he has from ancestors. But John's gospel starts at creation. John wants us to know this is a story built into the universe. And this notion of a figure present close to God at creation recalls Israel's depiction of Lady Wisdom, the figure of wisdom who also in chapter 8 of the book of Proverbs says she was present at creation, the first of God's works, before even the works of old. She was there, functioning almost as God's architect in creation. With God and through wisdom, as here through the Word, it all came to be. What is it? It is, in Greek, the logos. We might say the Word. We've come to know it as the incarnate Word. It's what God spoke in order to create. That word when God said, "Let there be light." It is the principle behind creation and within it. In verse 10 here in John's first chapter, it says, "It was in the world, and yet the world did not know it." John's prologue here jumbles together a number of different kinds of images. The creation, Lady Wisdom at creation, the word that God spoke, the principle that stands behind the order that is present in the universe. All these different images combined in this hymn, this poetry that is the prologue to the gospel. And yet through all of that jumbled together, there is one thrust. And that is that the word becomes flesh in a way that is fully aligned with what God has been doing all along. This is not God fixing what the Jews got wrong. Some, going all the way back to the great early church theologian St. Augustine, some have understood he came to his own, but his own did not know him, as meaning, see, he came to the Jews and they didn't get it. Well, that's patently false because the earliest believers in Jesus were Jews. But it's even more deeply wrong in the context of this hymn, because in the hymn, what belongs to the Word, what belongs to the one that becomes flesh, is all of creation. That word, that principle, that wisdom is present in all of creation. It's in creation, and yet creation does not recognize it. So rather than suggesting that Jesus came to this group and they didn't get it, so God instead sent him in flesh and then somebody else got it. No, that's not it at all. But instead, it shows how what non-Jews now find in Jesus is the God of Israel. And so in chapter 8 of John's Gospel, there's a big dispute about who is the one that Jesus calls my Father. And Jesus and the Gospel writer assert unequivocally that my Father, when Jesus says it, is the God of Abraham and Sarah, and therefore the God of the whole creation, the one God of heaven and earth. God's word in wisdom, in Torah, in Jesus, God's word is the truth about the universe and how we live in it well. Because God not only dwells with us, God also seeks for us to dwell in God. God bless and Merry Christmas.